Thank you to our audience for your interest in today's topic, What Employees Want, Clarity Matters with Recruiting Messages. My role today is brief and threefold. First, I'll review our agenda, then I'll set the context for our presentation, and then finally, Andrew did a great job introducing our speaker, Bruce Erenkrantz, and I will welcome him to the podium. So first off, let's take a look at our agenda. We'll begin by setting the stage with a synopsis of the key elements of Work 3.0, and then Bruce will dive right into our EVP for attracting and recruiting talent. He'll review EVP's definition and measurement, our global EVP results, implications for recruiting and messaging, and then provide tips on how your organization can capitalize on EVP. Finally, as Andrew mentioned, we will have period for Q&A. So next, I'd like to help Bruce focus his remarks for our live audience today. Let's do a poll to find out about your interest and your prior experiences with EVP. Which of the following statements best describes where your organization is relative to developing and using employee value proposition? So just click on the oval to the left of the box, and you can lock in your answers. Looking like the results are locking down and that the majority of our audience is interested and doesn't know as much about it. And so this will be, a good conversation to get into. There's a couple of you that are pretty far along the journey, and so we'll ask you to share some of your experiences and learnings in our Q&A section. So thank you for that. So the second part of my role here is some context setting. Employee value proposition is a very big topic. There's an awful lot of different types of organizations that are involved in that. So to frame our presentation, know that Volterra approaches this topic through two lenses. And the first lens is our organizational context. Our firm's mission is to help leading organizations identify barriers to enhanced organizational effectiveness, and then to help them implement solutions for competitive advantage. Volterra is a global expert in what questions to ask employees to gain insights that will contribute to better business decisions. We do this with a belief in the power of clarity. Clarity starts with precise, straightforward data, the evidence, not a hunch, a hope, or an anecdote. We help our clients make decisions on all kinds based on actionable data. Our second lens is that of our worldview. And we believe that we are entering the intricate web of Work 3.0. And that we believe that firms that are more effective in recruiting and engagement will accrue greater competitive advantage. And that's why Bruce's subject is so important today. This is not the war for talent, Chapter 2. Let's take a look at the summary of what key leaders are talking about and what the headlines are shouting. You'll recognize many of these themes: the interconnected global economies, the east to west expansion. Speed, of course, is still on the list. Mobility, the borderless workforce, the aging workforce, jobs requiring more training than ever before, and new demands for new skills. So what are the implications for talent strategy? Well, much has been written about the most in-demand talent. They will become even more sought after as the competitive arena continues to expand. Winners will increasingly do a better job with employer of choice and country of choice strategies. Segmenting, targeting, and positioning will become more sophisticated in recruiting. And beginning with accurate, actionable data will be key. If these issues are important to your organization, this is the right webinar for you. So now my third job today is to welcome Bruce Erenkrantz, my friend and colleague, to the podium. Andrew went over his background. Know, too, that when Bruce is not working, he can be found traveling throughout California, and when he can get away, around the world. So as I welcome Bruce to our virtual stage here, I'm going to put up one more poll for you to weigh in on your organization's most pressing talent concern. So lock in your responses as Bruce arrives to our podium. Bruce, welcome. And will you begin your remarks with your take on the results of our audience poll here?
Sure, and thank you, Susan. I'm really looking forward to our time together today to discuss this very interesting topic of the employee value proposition. And as I am seeing the results at this point, it looks like retaining and increasing the pool of high potentials is one of the largest talent concerns, and I think we'll be able to help in that area. And that looks by and large the one that is the biggest concern for organizations. Okay, great. So obviously, employers know what they will provide to workers, and those choices are based on conscious decisions. Generally, they're based on financial information, corporate culture, and the country in which they're located. It's just as important for employees to know what they are expected to give to their employers. They know they need to show up to work and put in the effort to help the organization meet and exceed its goals. The issue we're going to address today is whether leaders understand what employees want in return for their efforts. As we will see, what employees value differs by a number of factors. Understanding what different groups of employees value is important in determining what should be offered to employees as a part of the employment package. But first, let's discuss what we mean when we say EVP. A number of you had indicated that you weren't very knowledgeable about EVP, so I think it'll be important for us to have a common understanding, common vocabulary. It's a method that we use here at Valterra to allow leaders to learn about the ideal employment preferences of employees. We'll focus on how EVP can help in your recruitment strategy, but also be aware that EVP analyses can help address engagement and retention issues. And these aspects of EVP will be addressed in upcoming webinars. All employees, like customers, are not the same. EVP can provide insight into employee preferences by examining those differences across geographic categories, could be emerging markets versus developing markets, could be by country, segments of the population where recruitment is challenging, business units. It can even be enterprise-wide examination of what is important to employees. EVP analyses often start with survey data focused on the different characteristics of the employment relationship. EVP can help attract more or different candidates, since recruitment messaging can be modified and even tailored to different audiences of potential applicants. In addition, if you understand what candidates want, you can have better conversations with them during the recruitment process, and this can carry over to the onboarding process as well. So when you try to understand what employees value in their relationships with employers, you need to use data, both quantitative and qualitative, as you'll see later in today's webinar. And as Susan mentioned, it's really not a time to use intuition or hunches or anecdotes. We focus on 27 attributes of the work environment to group employees into segments. We generally find about a half a dozen segments within a company. However, the composition of each segment and actually the segments themselves can vary by company, and within a segment can vary by different demographics. Location of where the employees are located, job level, the function of the employee departments, even field versus headquarter employees have different attributes that they value. So as you can see here, what we do is to present a list of 27 attributes, ask employees to indicate the 6 most and 6 least important characteristics of the work environment. The attributes themselves can be categorized into a number of areas such as job security, organizational value, meaningful work, workload, role clarity, and the other groupings that you see here on the slide. Well, I've been talking about segments, and I have listed here so you can start getting an understanding of what we mean when we talk about employee segments. But I've listed 4 of them here. They're common. Each segment has a name. Not that the name itself is important, but having a name makes it easy to talk about each of the profiles or segments. What we have here are 4 groups of people, each focused on specific attributes of the work environment. In the Reward Me segment, people are focused on compensation in a variety of forms: base pay, incentives, bonus. In the Challenge Me segment, people are focused on skill development, empowerment, and the opportunity to advance. Work-life balance and flexibility is important, is valued by people in the don't stress me out portion or segment, and then those employees in the take care of me segment are focused on benefits, generally health and retirement plans, and that's what is key for these workers. So here are 4 common segments that we see in our research. And again, the names aren't important, but it does make it easy for us to communicate. So as we mentioned, differences in what is important to employees exist based on a number of factors. We generally have demographic data on the survey respondents so we can conduct advanced research. But at this point, what I'd like to do is focus on country differences, since we're looking at a global audience. We have data from 36 different countries. Here are 4 attributes: challenging work, continuous learning and development, and flexibility in hours and a convenient schedule. As you can see, I've picked 5 different countries: Chile, China, Hong Kong, the Netherlands, and the U.S., and that what is important, what attribute is important to employees in the different countries change depending upon what the value is. So challenging work is valued more by employees in Chile and the Netherlands, whereas employees in China and Hong Kong value continuous learning and development more than employees in the 3 other countries. And then finally, for flexibility, U.S. employees value it much more than employees in the other countries. These findings related to individual attributes are interesting, but where the real use comes in is to know whether there are groups of employees who value the same combination of attributes. So let's look at what we find when we conduct the segmentation analysis. I have picked 3 different segments of employees. You'll notice that they all value base wages, as you can tell from the high percentage of people who value base wages in each of the segments. But notice, one group also values a balanced workload. You can see that right here, where another segment values job security and paid time off. The third segment values challenging work. So while each segment values base wages, they are different in what else they value. And knowing that you have 3 groups of employees who value different aspects of the employment relationship is important for all the reasons we've already stated. However, we can go deeper in our understanding by asking people to tell us what a company does well and how it can improve upon its delivery of what is valued. In step 1, where we ask about what attributes are most important and least important, we get an understanding of what is important to employees. However, in a second step, we can learn about the depth of the feelings and what employees mean when they select the most and least important characteristics of the workplace. We use text analytics to analyze the comments we receive from the survey respondents, the employees, as they identify different themes, and we also can understand whether people are saying something positive or negative about a topic. In understanding the sentiment, positive or negative aspects of what people are writing can also add additional value. So here are 4 different topics that employees chose to write about, and we've analyzed what people write and determine if they're providing positive or negative comments. The sentiment analysis is useful when we want to understand why people chose the attributes that are most and least important to them. So let's look at some of the topics that people write about. Trust and fairness. The comments made by employees in the "don't stress me" segment, those people right here, are certainly less positive than what is said by other employees from different segments. If I take a look at workload at the bottom of the graph, I can see that only those employees in the challenge me segment have positive sentiment for what they have to say about workload. And I think it would make sense why people who want to be challenged might also have positive comments about workload in their particular situation. So let's take a look at the Reward Me segment and what they have to say and what they are writing about. First of all, I don't know about you, but this chart makes my head spin. As we can see, people write about a lot of different topics. However, only a few of them are mentioned by a sizable number of employees in the Reward Me segment. If you take a look at the bars representing the frequency, you'll see that job security, workload, benefits, wages, advancement are mentioned by more than 10% or about 10% of the employees in the Reward Me segment. But the other thing that we can look at is the line graph, this orange graph here that shows the sentiment. You'll notice the horizontal bar here is the 0 point on sentiment. So as you can tell, people are talking a lot about benefits, and they are saying rather negative comments about benefits. So let's take a deeper dive into benefits and what people are saying. Without a doubt, there's an issue related to health benefits for this group. Almost half the comments are about this benefit, and the sentiment is decidedly negative. Now, leaders can decide what they want to do about health benefits if they want to improve the delivery of the value proposition to this segment of their workforce. There is something else that can be done with the combination of quantitative and qualitative data obtained from an EVP project. That is, you can create a picture with words to build a better understanding of your employee segments. I'm going to call these picture built with words personas, and they can be used in conjunction with your recruiting materials to help build a connection between your organization and the people interested in joining your company. And on this next slide, I have a sample persona, and I'll give you a minute or so to review the persona for Emily. She's age 28. She's got a BA in Business Administration from The Ohio State University. So as you can see from this excerpt from the persona, money is important to Emily. She joined the ABC company because of the salary increase that came with her job and the ability to earn a bonus. But she just doesn't want money without some effort. So she understands she needs to help her boss, Alexander, if the sales team is going to be successful. So you'll note that at the bottom of the description, in this area here, it mentions that she goes above and beyond by asking for additional areas of responsibilities. She continues working even after she goes home. She responds to evening emails. She will work on locating facts for Alexander on the weekend. She wants to make them successful because she wants the team to make the bonus. You also see at the top where we have information about how long she's worked for the organization, what her position is, and that is very helpful, again, in building this description of a Reward Me individual. Remember, we collect demographic information when we collect the EVP preferences. So by putting the EVP preferences together with the demographic information, together with the comments, we really can make a segment come alive by the addition of the story behind its membership. Well, we've talked about EVP and it's important to your organization. But I have one more piece of information for you, and that is how well your organization delivers on the promise of EVP. When employees are asked whether the organization delivers what's important to them, employees in the best-in-class organizations rate their employers higher than employees in other companies. And this is true across each one of these segments or profiles. that we have listed here. And these best-in-class companies are among the most admired companies and best places to work. So what does this mean for you and for your organization? What do you as global leaders do with the information? Well, first of all, everyone needs to recognize that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to the complex challenges of attraction and recruitment. And as you have mentioned in your poll, retaining and increasing your pool of high potentials is key to a number of your organizations. So just like your marketing department knows, different buyers have different needs and different wants. Different employees have different needs and wants in the employment relationship. They value different aspects of the work environment. And you need to use solid foundational information to improve the effectiveness of your recruiting campaign. 100% alignment between what you offer and what employees want is not necessary. I don't think anybody would ever say you have to have complete alignment. However, having a better understanding of what employees value and the different groups of employees, where they're located within your organization, whether it be a country or a function, and what types of employees, in the case of high potentials, are they located in one of the segments, or are they spread across a number of the segments? That information is useful for you when you are trying to retain your high potentials or other employees. And combining EVP and text analytics provides your organization with a wealth of information that can be used to shape the work environment not only for future employees, but your current employees as well. There's one other point that I would like to make, and that is EVP and engagement seem to enhance one another. There does seem to be a multiplier effect. Selecting people with values that match what your organization offers and onboarding and managing them in a similarly aligned way can set the stage for engagement and enhanced business performance. There's more to come on the value of EVP for engagement purposes, and we're examining that joint effect now. So I would ask you to stay tuned as we have more, we have more webinars on the horizon. Next month, I will be talking about engagement and retention. And then in November, Kyle Lundby, who is the director of our Asia Pacific organization, will be talking about the global leadership essentials to engage and retain talent. And Kyle is going to be opening our Asia office next year and is visiting there on a number of occasions already, and he has a lot of experience in the Asia Pacific arena in terms of helping organizations with global leadership issues. So at this point, I would like to turn the webinar back to Susan, as she has been collecting questions, and hopefully I will be able to actually answer some of them for you. So, Susan?
Thank you, Bruce. As people are typing their questions into the Q&A bar and the tab across, let's start out with a question that we often get from our clients, Bruce, which is, how different are your segments from one organization to another? And will almost all organizations have the 4 primary segments that you refer to in your presentation?
That's a great question, and you're right. Organizational segments do vary, and the proportion of employees in the different segments will vary even if a common segment appears across organizations. The 4 segments I've been showing and talking about are common in most organizations, but depending on its culture, each specific organization will have some subtle nuances. For example, in a company that caters to working parents by adopting policies that allow more flexibility, we might see a segment that combines element of don't stress me out with elements of challenge me. In other words, a segment of people who really want to take on challenging assignments but also want to be able to attend to their external commitments for work. Other organizations have a reputation for being relationship-oriented, again, back to the culture, and they may see a stronger emphasis on values related to good management or teamwork. Organizations with a heavy R&D component might see a segment similar to the challenge me, but include a strong innovation focus. So I would say that there are common segments, but who is in a segment and the proportion of people in a segment will differ across organizations.
Great. Thank you, Bruce. There's a lot of interest in high potential employees, making sure that recruiting efforts are focusing on high performing employees. And so there are a number of questions here from someone in our audience really asking about a lot of different dimensions around high potential. What are the biggest misconceptions that organizations tend to have regarding hypos? What messages, are most compelling? Any information, around specific emerging trends? When you've done this work with clients, Bruce, wondering what you can share about specifically around hypos, and I know you've done a lot that you were referring to around engaged employees as well.
Yes, I would say that having the ability to understand what high potentials value is key to their retention. By conducting an EVP analysis within your organization, you'll be able to see what different people value, and especially in this case, the high potentials. You already know where they're located. You already know who you have identified as high potentials. But truly understanding what they want is going to be key in keeping them motivated and retaining those employees. As the poll indicated, it's retaining and increasing the pool of high potentials. So if I think about what we have done in terms of increasing the pool by better understanding what your current high potentials value, you will be able to recruit more people who have those same values, who fit within the organizational culture. Obviously, you need to be looking at their skills and abilities in addition to what they value, but you certainly want to be able to offer those individuals what they really want in the organization or from an organization, because those are the people who are the most valued elsewhere. In terms of messaging to them, I would focus on, and our clients have focused on, letting them know that there are extra benefits allotted to them as high potentials. They get more attention, maybe more development. I don't mean benefits in terms of health benefits, retirement benefits. I'm talking more about the benefits of being developed. In terms of misconceptions, I think the biggest misconception I've heard about is that all high potentials are created equal. And I would argue that I have seen high potentials in different segments, and I'm trying to keep this with our employee value proposition theme for today, but they're interested in different aspects of the work environment for different reasons. And those values, those attributes that they do value can change over time based upon how the organization is changing and based upon how they are going through life and the life changes that they are experiencing. Susan?
Very good, Bruce. Much of what we've heard about employer branding and value proposition talks about having one overall message for a full organization, and we know that that can sometimes be complicated, if not impossible. But you also talked about having some different segments of employees, and how do you reconcile those approaches in a real-world environment?
Well, I think that there is a time and a place for a broad message, the employer brand, so to speak, and that an organization should consider both the overall message as well as these different segment messages that I've been talking about. The things that reflect the brand of an organization, those are the core messages, and they can be and should be common across the organizations. Things that you're known for and that most of your current employees agree that your organization does well. However, each organization has different subpopulations, our segments, with different needs and different values. And being aware of those different segments of the organization can help you better target not only your recruitment messaging, but your retention messaging. Now, I've often thought about retention as re-recruiting your current talent. And you want to let them know that you understand what they value and that you are doing what you can to match their needs against what the organization can offer. And so by having the different segment messages, you can communicate more effectively with a particular segment as well as with the broader audience in general.
Okay, Bruce, this one is from Monica. The concept of EVP is focused on understanding what employees value in a company. And how do we as a company understand what our value is to the employees? In other words, how do we validate that we are in fact who we think we are?
I think that if I'm understanding the question right, a lot of what can be learned by asking how well an organization delivers on what is important can tell you a lot about who you are as an organization. If you believe that you are delivering what is important to employees, then you are in a much better place if in fact the employees tell you that you are delivering what is important to them. And so you can get that validation not only by understanding what employees value and matching that against what you are offering, but also by simply asking, as we do in our EVP projects, how well are what you value being delivered by the organization?
That's great. Here's another question, Bruce. Are there any parts of the world or population segments where EVP is going to be more relevant, more important to understand as we all are looking at global expansion?
I would say that we've talked about, and I think you mentioned it in your opening remarks, this isn't the war for talent. There has been a tremendous war for talent, and here is another weapon in how we can get the best talent. The talent that not only that we want to attract, but that we can retain, because our values match that person's value, that group of people's value. So in India, China, Brazil, other emerging economies where employment is up, it's hot, and people are starting to demand better wages, working conditions, and the like, we see EVP as a valuable tool for recruiting, differentiating who we are from other employers. It's also important in areas where particular groups are hard to keep. For example, in Hong Kong, we're hearing about financial service organizations poaching high potentials. So understanding what certain segments look for in the employment relationship can help you retain those groups. And again, we get back to the high potentials who are in demand across industries, across companies, and those may even be the people who would be looked at by some organizations for expat assignments, as an example.
Good point. Good point. Here's a more detailed question specifically on the topic of text analytics. And the gist of the question really is around, if you're working with open-ended comments, how relevant are all of the findings given the fact that not everybody is responding, not everybody who responded to this survey is sending in an open-ended comment. So it's kind of in part, how are you learning, and then, how relevant and how valid.
And I would say that's always the situation for open-ended questions. You're never quite sure who is responding to the questions. However, when you ask very pointed questions like we do about what the organization is doing well in the delivery of the value and what employees can do to improve upon their delivery of the employee value proposition, you can get very specific information from the employees, and you're able to, through the text analytics, be able to get a better understanding of what each person has to say. So while you may not be getting comments from everybody, typically we find a high response rate for very pointed questions like that, and using the advanced text analytics tools that we have developed and are used with employee survey data, we can get a very clear understanding of what is working, what is not working, and employees are very willing to tell you what they would do if they were in charge. And so you even can get information about what you can do to fix a situation. As I pointed out in the example that I showed earlier, health benefits, negative sentiment along with information about what can be done to improve the health benefits in the organization can go a long way in improving the delivery of the employee value proposition.
Very good. I think we probably just have time for one more question here before we hand it back to Andrew. But how about, Bruce, talk a little bit about the underlying survey that begins the process that you've been describing. Is this usually part of the enterprise employee engagement survey, or is this more often a completely separate survey, and what are the pros and cons of each can you do this with the sampling strategy to kind of get back at some of the relevance question of one of our earlier respondents?
We have used both approaches. We do use both approaches. It depends upon an organization's culture and their current survey processes. We can embed our EVP questions into a longer employee opinion or engagement survey, or if the company does not have an ongoing survey process or does not want to deploy a full engagement survey, we can use the EVP approach in a much shorter survey for employees and for organizations. Advantages of including it in a normal engagement survey is that people are used to having the survey. Survey administration typically is going to go smoothly. Project management teams are in place. And so there are not a lot of questions that are asked. In fact, all we do is present people with the 27 attributes, ask them to rank their top 6 and their bottom 6, how well the organization delivers on what is important to them, and then to tell us what the organization is doing well and what can be improved. So not very many questions, typically would not cause survey fatigue unless your survey, your regular engagement survey or opinion survey is extremely long. If you have a regular survey process, I wouldn't recommend having a special EVP survey simply because people are going to be over-surveyed. Now, if you have a survey program where you deliver your engagement survey biannually, then 1 year you could, in fact, do the short EVP survey. Typically, employee engagement surveys are full census surveys. If that's the case in your organization, then you don't have to worry about sampling. If you only have a sampling survey or you only want to administer an EVP survey to a sample, we can help you make sure that the survey is representative of your total organization so that you have valid, useful data, and you have enough data from different parts of the organizations with which we can do demographic analyses as well as build those personas that I showed you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Bruce, for responding to all the questions that have come in. And Andrew, I think we'll hand it back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan. And thank you, Bruce, for as well for your insight and your experiences and sharing them with us today.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yes, thank you. And that does bring us to the end of our time together today. I'd like to thank our presenters one more time, as well as Valterra, for underwriting this webcast. And please stay tuned for our next webcast, which will begin at 1 p.m., another live webcast, Acquiring Top Talent Through On-Demand Pipelines from Adecco. So please stay with us. Thank you.